Do you want to know about those companies that sell spyware capabilities to intelligence services, as well as why they charge so much? In today's episode, we'll explore such an example from a not-so-well-known company outside of the spy world, the Cy4Gate from Italy. Cy4Gate was established in 2014 in Italy with a single purpose: to provide advanced cyber capabilities to intelligence and law enforcement agencies. For instance, one of their products is the D-SINT, short for Digital Signals Intelligence, which is a SIGINT analysis platform, but they have more products that are widely used by several intelligence services across the world. Gens.AI, which is a tool used for backstop, building cover. It allows its users to create and manage large volumes of fake online accounts in order to facilitate online covert operations such as intelligence gathering, recruiting agents, and so on. But its most powerful capabilities, which according to leaked internal documents from 2021 are only available to Italian government customers, are Hydra and Epeius. Hydra, a spyware used to monitor online browsing, identify the applications used and websites visited, and ascertain whether VPN or Tor browser, two technologies that allow to safely browse, hiding one's identity, have been used. And Epeius is a spyware that can be installed on people's smartphones and devices in order to monitor their activities and extract, for example, copies of their chats and photos, location data, and email. So apparently most smaller nation-state actors that don't have massive SIGINT capabilities that could develop those on their own rely on commercially available solutions like those. And actually this is a massive market that most people don't even know that exists. But focusing more on Cy4Gate's advanced surveillance solutions for Italy's spy agencies, Epeius and Hydra, you might wonder why would a spy agency pay for those? Firstly, it's the ease of use, support, and the features provided by those platforms. So even non-tech savvy intel officers could be able to perform modern cyber-espionage operations, collect intel from a variety of platforms without having to know how they work, and so on. For instance, in this leaked 2021 slide for Epeius, we read that it can collect data directly from the endpoint, so it doesn't matter if the target uses encrypted communications or not, since it captures them after they are decrypted. It has stealth injection mechanisms, and more on that in a bit, and untraceable data transfers. And we also get a peek into what it looks like from the intel officer's perspective. So the first reason why spy agencies would pay for something like Cy4Gate is all of that. But secondly, and most importantly, it's that implementation of a number of innovative techniques to infect the target device. Here is the issue: even if you have the best spyware or software implant using the Five Eyes terminology, it's useless if you cannot find a way to install it in your target's devices without being noticed. And despite what most people think, finding vulnerabilities and being able to chain them together to hack into modern devices is becoming almost like an art. It is so challenging that even if a cyber researcher finds a vulnerability, it might take them many months or even years, and again they might be trying for months and still being unable to make it work, basically turning this into a working exploit. Something that can take advantage of the security hole in order to hack into a system. For modern platforms like Android, iOS and so on, this has become so hard that companies and spy agencies are willing to pay literally millions for a working hacking tool. And the worst part, from the moment it's used, it's only a matter of time until it will get discovered and fixed by the vendor. In some cases it might be operational for a few months, maybe a few years, but it could also get exposed literally in the first operational use. And that's the second reason why governments pay huge amounts of money to companies like Cy4Gate, to ensure that they will always have such exploits without having to do all of the research and development and the expenses associated with that. And after that long intro, let's look at a real-world example of such an exploit from Cy4Gate, which was exposed and fixed in 2023. If you think of a device as layers of technology, the lower layer you'll be able to find a vulnerability in, the more devices you could target. For example, finding a vulnerability in an application will only be useful if the target uses that specific application. But what if you could find a vulnerability in a hardware chip that is used by almost all mobile phones, right? So a company that manufactures such electronic components is ARM. For those unfamiliar, think of a kernel driver as a software that allows a device to interact with a hardware component, in this case the graphics chips that ARM had developed. So Google did a detailed analysis of this flaw that Italian spy agencies were using from Cy4Gate to secretly install the Epeius spyware that we just talked about in the devices of their targets. It affected virtually all Android devices that hadn't applied those security updates that were released in October of 2023. So roughly any device for the period of approximately 2016 to 2023. We do not know if Cy4Gate had this from 2016 or if they discovered it later on, but that's the maximum range. So 7 years or less of a secret hacking capability. Without going into technical details, that kernel driver had a mistake, something called use after free, that literally means that the program is using some memory that was incorrectly freed up, and thus it doesn't contain valid data. Now, how to turn that use after free into a hacking tool that can do whatever the exploit developer wants is almost an art. It involves deep understanding of the driver, the platform, and smart software engineering skills to do something like this. Prepare what will be stored in that memory space that will be incorrectly freed up, and note that freeing up this memory doesn't mean it's getting cleaned up, the data remain there. Then do some perfectly timed combination of actions that will trigger something to read from that freed up memory where you placed your hacking code, and this way trick the system into executing whatever you want, with the system seeing all of that as a normal execution flow, not anything malicious. In this particular case, making it install the Cy4Gate spyware that we just talked about. If you want to understand the technical details in depth, then check out Google's blog post that is available in the video's description. Now, although using this type of infiltration method is the most reliable way to hack into someone's device, it's also the most expensive. For the reasons we already covered, the research and development, the potential of losing all of this research in the first attempt and so on. So there were also some more inexpensive means that Cy4Gate was known to have used. So let's look into one of those less sophisticated covert activities that involved Cy4Gate. In January of 2021, the Israeli cybersecurity firm ZecOps discovered some websites hosting a fake WhatsApp application. Further investigation uncovered that those belonged to Cy4Gate, and they were part of an ongoing cyber-espionage operation where a Cy4Gate customer, based on what we just saw, almost certainly from Italy, were messaging people to download WhatsApp, but pointing to that link, not a legitimate one. Obviously, this fake WhatsApp application was coming pre-installed with a spyware. Specifically, this backdoored version of WhatsApp was giving access to virtually everything on the target's device. And not so long after that, in February of 2021, the Italian newspaper Il Fatto Quotidiano reported that the prosecutor's office in Naples had ordered its employees to stop using surveillance technology made by SIO and Cy4Gate, a company that was linked to a series of malicious phishing pages, one of which purported to be a WhatsApp download site, as Motherboard reported last week. And from the same article, the two sources, who asked to remain anonymous to discuss sensitive law enforcement matters, said the suspension was due to a serious malfunction in how the malware works. In some cases, when a law enforcement operator tasked the malware with exfiltrating data from a target's phone, it would pop up a notification which could tip off the target that they are under surveillance, according to the sources. So, kind of a confirmation that Italian intelligence services were behind that specific incident. But do you also recall that Cy4Gate product called Gens.AI platform used to create and manage fake online accounts, right? In Meta's 2023 threat report that was published in February of 2024, we get a better idea of how this was operationally used. Meta wrote in that report that we removed a network of accounts on Facebook and Instagram linked to Italian surveillance for hire company Cy4Gate, which is associated with a larger defense contractor called ELT Group. Our latest research found Cy4Gate using fake accounts with GAN profile photos, likely to scrape public information about its targets. And Meta continues that we also took down a network of accounts on Facebook and Instagram linked to an Italian spyware firm called RCS Labs, owned by Cy4Gate. This network consisted of multiple clusters of activity, including those operated from Italy, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia. In addition to using fake accounts to test their malicious capabilities targeting Android and iOS devices, RCS Labs and its customers used tactics that included social engineering and phishing across the internet, including Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Their fictitious personas posed as protesters, journalists, and young women to trick people into sharing their emails and phone numbers, as well as clicking on malicious links. These would typically be one-time use, trackable URLs, generated through freely available IP tracking services, meant to identify and trace their targets' IP addresses. We also found RCS Labs and its customers embed canary tokens in Word documents that were disguised as news articles or anti-government petitions. This is also likely designed to track the target's IPs and profile their devices, enabling the early stage of the surveillance attack chain, reconnaissance. Targeting by RCS Labs and its customers included journalists, activists, and dissidents in Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia. In conclusion, this episode showed a piece of the modern world of espionage that isn't as widely advertised, and for a good reason. Many intelligence services across the globe rely on companies like Cy4Gate to perform SIGINT collection or even online covert action in many cases. And whether that's for a single nation state only, like Cy4Gate with Italy, or for more actors, those companies thrive in this grey area that some call cyber mercenaries. But regardless of what you call them, the only reason that they exist is because there is a demand. And the only reason that there is demand is because such capabilities used to be only accessible to powerful SIGINT players that had the resources and skills to develop those on their own. So, like most things in the spy world, that's a double-edged sword. Thus, making those available violates the privacy and reducing everyone's security by keeping all of those security flaws secret for years. Definitely. But doesn't that also democratize something that a few years back only a handful of spy agencies across the world could do, and the rest of the world had no defense against it? Absolutely. So let us know what you think about it too. What's your opinion about Cy4Gate and companies of that sort? It's another grey area of that spy world that nicely highlights how nothing is as it seems.